Before we begin, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because stories like this don't survive on the surface of Hollywood history. They live beneath it. What you're about to hear isn't the polished myth of old Hollywood, but the uncomfortable truth hiding behind carefully framed shots, lifted camera angles, and decades of silence. The golden age of Hollywood sold the world an illusion of towering masculinity, men who dominated the screen with presence, power, and physical authority. But the reality behind the camera was far more fragile. Many of these so-called giants were smaller than the legends built around them, and that insecurity shaped not just how films were shot, but how lives unraveled. This isn't a story about height alone. It's about obsession, shame, control, scandal, and the extreme measures taken to protect an image once millions of dollars depended on it. Hollywood didn't just manufacture stars, it engineered them. And when cracks appeared in the illusion, studios buried the truth, sometimes literally digging the ground beneath actors' feet to keep the fantasy alive. Golden Age Hollywood demanded dominance. Leading men weren't just expected to act powerful, they had to look overwhelming the moment they entered the frame. Studios believed masculinity was measured in inches, shoulders, and how easily a man could command space. Camera lenses became tools of deception. Platforms were disguised as furniture. Trenches were carved into studio floors. Scripts were rewritten to keep women seated and men standing taller. Audiences never noticed because they weren't supposed to. The illusion worked so well that generations accepted it as truth. But behind the glamour, fear ruled. Actors knew that one unflattering photo could end a career. Publicists worked overtime, inflating heights, staging interviews, and manipulating press images. What looked effortless on screen required constant maintenance off it. Hollywood wasn't celebrating confidence, it was exploiting insecurity. And nowhere was that more visible than in the careers of the era's most famous leading men, many of whom lived in quiet terror of being exposed as physically ordinary in a world that demanded giants. Humphrey Bogart became the face of hard-boiled masculinity, yet his presence was carefully engineered. On the set of Casablanca, directors quickly realized something wasn't working. Ingrid Bergman, elegant and tall, unintentionally revealed Bogart's real stature. The solution wasn't subtle. A wooden box was slid beneath his feet, lifting him just enough to restore balance in the frame. The box followed him from film to film, quietly becoming part of his career. Crew members joked about it, but no one dared challenge the system. Bogart reportedly hated the box, not because it existed, but because it reminded him how fragile the illusion was. Studios inflated his listed height, staged interviews where he sat higher than others, and avoided full-body shots whenever possible. Audiences never suspected a thing. What they felt wasn't size, it was authority. Hollywood proved that presence could be manufactured, and Bogart became living proof that masculinity wasn't always natural. Sometimes, it was built from wood, lighting, and silence. Kirk Douglas didn't hide his insecurity, he fought it. On the set of Spartacus, director Stanley Kubrick demanded visual dominance. When Douglas appeared too small next to armored extras, trenches were dug into the ground so others stood lower. Douglas knew. Everyone knew. The humiliation fueled his temper. Stories from crew members describe explosive outbursts over seemingly minor suggestions. A simple mention of a booster box once ended an entire photo shoot. Yet Douglas also did something few dared. He challenged Hollywood power. By publicly crediting blacklisted writer Dalton Trumbo, Douglas risked his career and damaged studio relationships. The irony was sharp. A man insecure about physical stature stood taller morally than many of his peers. When Douglas later received an honorary Oscar, the standing ovation wasn't for height or image. It was for defiance. Hollywood could manipulate angles, but it couldn't fake courage. Charlie Chaplin's small frame never limited his screen magic. As the tramp, he transcended size entirely. But off-screen, the contrast was disturbing. His marriage to a 16-year-old shocked the nation and shattered his wholesome image. Rumors multiplied, some documented, others whispered. Court cases, FBI surveillance, and tabloid headlines slowly eroded the public's affection. Chaplin's genius remained unquestioned, but trust evaporated. The man who embodied innocence on screen was increasingly portrayed as predatory behind it. Hollywood protected him for years, But eventually, the weight of scandal pushed him into exile. Chaplin's story revealed a deeper truth. The industry would forgive almost anything until it couldn't. And when the illusion broke, it broke violently. Frank Sinatra wasn't just conscious of his height, he engineered around it. Custom elevator shoes added inches, weight, and stability so no one could tell. But the insecurity never left. His explosive temper, volatile relationships, and hunger for control mirrored a man constantly proving himself. The media weaponized his stature, tying it to masculinity and ego. His marriages, mob rumors, and public breakdowns fed the narrative of a man overcompensating. Yet Sinatra's power was undeniable. He ruled stages, studios, and Vegas backrooms alike. Height didn't limit his reach, but it haunted him. The lifts became armor, not just footwear. James Cagney was pure kinetic energy. Small, fast, and dangerous, he redefined screen toughness. Studios tried to hide his size, but Cagney leaned into it. His explosive movement became his signature. Off-screen, his temper matched his roles. Insults about his height triggered physical confrontations. Rumors of leg-lengthening surgery circulated, unproven but telling. The idea that a man so intimidating on screen could be haunted by inches revealed Hollywood's cruelty. Cagney survived by turning insecurity into intensity, becoming unforgettable not despite his size, but because of it. Mickey Rooney was once Hollywood's biggest draw and its smallest leading man. Fame came early and fast, but adulthood exposed what childhood stardom hid. His marriages became tabloid punchlines. Gambling drained his fortune. Public jokes about his height turned cruel. A single photograph of Rooney drunk and broke became symbolic of his fall. Hollywood didn't protect him, it watched him unravel. Size wasn't the cause, but it became the punchline. Alan Ladd's career depended on literal holes in the ground. Trenches were dug daily to keep him visually dominant. Off-screen, the pressure crushed him. Alcohol and pills became escapes. His death left questions unanswered. Hollywood had built him up and buried him quietly when he broke. Edward G. Robinson needed no tricks. His eyes and voice did the work. But politics ended what size never could. Blacklisting reduced him to shadows of his former power. Hollywood proved it could erase legends faster than it made them. By the time Hollywood perfected its visual tricks, the damage was already done. These men weren't just acting strong on screen. They were carrying the burden of an impossible standard every day of their lives. The studios never asked whether the illusion was healthy. They only asked whether it sold tickets. Height became shorthand for power, confidence, and masculinity, even though none of those qualities are actually measured in inches. The result was a system where insecurity was quietly encouraged and then exploited. Actors learned early that admitting weakness meant losing roles. So they smiled, stood on boxes, wore lifts, and allowed entire sets to be reshaped around their bodies. What audiences applauded as effortless charisma was often the product of anxiety, anger, and fear of exposure. The tragedy isn't that these men were shorter than expected. The tragedy is that Hollywood taught them it mattered more than talent, discipline, or integrity. And once that belief took hold, it followed them long after the cameras stopped rolling. The power of the studios didn't end at the edge of the screen. They controlled newspapers, magazines, and publicity photos with military precision. Heights were inflated on press sheets. Interviews were staged so actors sat while others stood. Romantic pairings were carefully selected to avoid visual contrast. Actresses taller than certain male stars were quietly passed over, regardless of talent. This wasn't coincidence, it was policy. Studio executives believed the public couldn't handle the truth, and in doing so, they created a fantasy world where reality itself became dangerous. Any deviation from the image risked ridicule or career damage. Reporters who hinted at the truth were frozen out. Crew members who joked too openly were reassigned. Hollywood didn't just sell movies, it enforced silence. And for decades, that silence worked. The audience believed what it was shown, unaware of the manipulation shaping every frame. What these stories reveal is that masculinity in Golden Age Hollywood was never natural. It was performed. Strength was choreographed. Authority was framed. Confidence was edited in post-production. Men were taught to dominate space, even when that space had to be physically altered to make it possible. This performance didn't end when the director yelled cut. Many actors carried it into their marriages, friendships, and public lives. Anger became a substitute for vulnerability. Control replaced honesty. For some, fame magnified these traits until they became destructive. When the public later witnessed broken marriages, addictions, and scandals, few connected them back to the pressure cooker that created them. Hollywood celebrated toughness but punished softness, leaving many stars emotionally stranded. They were admired, envied, and isolated all at once. Eventually, the illusion cracked, not all at once but slowly, painfully. A photograph here, a live appearance there, a joke that landed too sharply. Once the public noticed, it never quite forgot. The same audience that adored these men could turn cruel in an instant. Late-night hosts mocked them. Tabloids exaggerated flaws. What had once been protected became ammunition. Hollywood rarely defended fallen stars. It moved on. New faces replaced old ones, and yesterday's legends were left to explain themselves in interviews no one watched. Exposure didn't just reveal physical truth, it revealed how disposable fame really was. The system that built these men had no interest in saving them. Behind closed doors, the fallout was devastating. Many of these actors struggled with depression, alcoholism, and dependence on pills. Some withdrew completely. Others lashed out, burning bridges and relationships. A few never recovered. The public saw the headlines but missed the cause. It wasn't weakness, it was exhaustion. Living inside a lie, even a glamorous one, takes a toll. Every public appearance became a performance within a performance. Every photo carried risk. And without modern conversations about mental health, there was nowhere to land safely. Hollywood expected resilience but offered no mercy. What's remarkable is that despite everything, many of these men delivered performances that still resonate today. Their talent outgrew the lie that confined them. Audiences remember their voices, expressions, timing, and presence, not their height. This is the ultimate irony. The very thing Hollywood obsessed over mattered least. Their legacy survives not because of how tall they appeared, but because of how deeply they connected. The illusion faded. The work endured. While modern Hollywood appears more open, the same pressures exist under new names. Image still dominates. Insecurity is still monetized. Technology has replaced boxes and trenches, but the goal remains the same: control perception at all costs. The Golden Age didn't invent the problem, it perfected it, and the echoes are still felt today. True power was never about height, size, or dominance. It was about presence, conviction, and authenticity. The men who survived Hollywood's machinery did so not by growing taller, but by standing firmer in who they were. The ones remembered with respect earned it through courage, not illusion. These stories aren't about mocking the past. They're about understanding it. They remind us how easily systems exploit fear and how costly silence can be. They challenge the idea that perfection is real or necessary, and they reveal the human cost behind the shine. Golden Age Hollywood sold dreams, but it demanded sacrifices few ever saw. Beneath the lights stood men balancing on boxes, lifts, and expectations that no human could truly meet. Their stories matter because they strip away the fantasy and leave us with something more valuable: truth. And truth, unlike illusion, doesn't need to stand taller to be powerful.